SLT Mobitel Fiber, the fiber of the nation. SLT Mobitel Fiber, the fiber of the nation.
රෝස සුවඳ තවත් දෙකෝ කලක් රැඳෙන්න ඩබල් පර්ෆියුම් ලුක් සමගින් එන නව සන්ලයිට් රෝස්.
Tonight, past the post. The third reading of the Appropriation Bill 2022 passes in Parliament with a 2/3 majority as the government rejects opposition claims of forceful dollar conversions. Available for viewing. The long elusive Yugadanavi New Fortress Energy Agreement turns up in Parliament. New rules. Authorities announce vaccine cards to be made mandatory in public soon as first doses green-lighted for teens. Increasing the competition. President Gotabaya Rajapaksa argues the case to have more private sector universities.
Those who object to the establishment of more universities in Sri Lanka lack confidence in their ability to succeed such a competitive environment.
All that and much more coming up on First at 9. This Friday, the 10th of December, 2021.
නැවුම් කුළුබඩු 12ක එකතුවකින් no biryani mix restaurant රසට බිරියානියක් දැන් ගෙදරදීම.
From AdaDerana, this is AdaDerana First at 9. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
Good evening, welcome to First at 9. I'm Dhamma Keknai. Now then, the third reading of the Appropriation Bill 2022 passed in Parliament today with amendments by a 93-vote majority after 16 days of debates. Following the conclusion of the committee stage debate today, Speaker Mahinda Abeyewardene announced that 157 parliamentarians voted in favour while 64 voted against. Meanwhile, in the run-up to the vote, opposition leader Sajith Premadasa brought up a claim that has been circulating on social media, alleging that the central bank is currently in the process of forcefully converting foreign currency held in non-resident foreign currency accounts to rupees.
ගැසට් දෙකක් ගහලා තියෙනවා ඔක්තෝබර් 28යි නොවැම්බර් 1 වෙනිදායි. මම මේ ගැසට් දෙක හැන්සාට් ගත කරනවා සභාගත කරනවා. පෞද්ගලික පුරවැසියන් වෙත ගලා එන විදේශ මුදල්. ඒ කියන්නේ භාණ්ඩ හා සේවා ආදායම මේ වෙනකොට මහ බැංකුව බලහත්කාරයෙන් පරිවර්තනය කිරීම ක්‍රියාත්මක කරගෙන යනවා. එහෙම කොහොමද වෙන්නේ? මේ රජයට රටේ මූල්‍ය කළමනාකරණය හරියාකාරව ක්‍රියාත්මක කරන්නට බැරි වූ තත්ත්වයක් තුල කොහොමද මහ බැංකුව තීන්දුව කරන්නේ බලහත්කාරයෙන් පරිවර්තනය කරන්නේ?
අද උදේ ඉඳන් කතා කරද්දී එක පැත්තකින් සජිත් ප්‍රේමදාස විපක්ෂ නායකතුමාට කවුරු හරි වැරදි තොරතුරු රාශියක් දීලා තියෙනවා. දැන් මේ විදේශ රටවල් වලට ගිහිල්ලා අපේ රටට මුදල් එවන විදේශ විනිමය එවන සේවකයන් පිළිබඳ අද ඔවුන් අවිනිශ්චිතභාවයක් ඇති කරනවා. මේ විදේශ ප්‍රේෂණයන් අරගෙන එන කණ්ඩායමට බයක් ඇති කරනවා. එයාලා ගෙන එන මුදල් අනිවාර්යෙන්ම ලංකාවේ ගිණුමට ආපු ගමන් ලංකාවේ මහ බැංකුව එහෙම නැත්නම් රජය ඒව රුපියල් බවට පරිවර්තනය කරනවා කියන කාරණාව. එහෙම එකක් වෙන්නේ නැහැ. විශේෂයෙන්ම කියන්න ඕනි අපි විදේශ ශ්‍රමිකයන් විසින් ඔවුන් එවන ප්‍රේෂණ කිසිම අවස්ථාවක මහ බැංකුව හෝ වෙනත් ආයතනයක් ශ්‍රී ලංකාවේ රුපියල් බවට පරිවර්තනය කරන්න කටයුතු කරන්නේ නැහැ. යම් කිසි හේකින් ඔවුන් මේ මුදල් රුපියල් බවට පරිවර්තනය කරොත් ඒ වාණිජ බැංකුව හරහා 10%ක මුදලක් මහ බැංකුව ලබා ගැනීමට කටයුතු කරනවා. ඒක කිසිම ආකාරයේ බලපෑමක් විදේශ ප්‍රේෂණ වලට ඇති වෙන්නේ නැහැ. අපි හරියට you understand this point very clearly. Why don't you explain the leader of the opposition about this? Don't create unnecessary speculations. Don't create unnecessary speculations in the country. You are very smart in creating speculations.
කීප දෙනෙක්ම මේ අර්බුදය තව පැහැදිලි කිරීම කරා. ඒක මම මොනම වෙලාවක අභියෝගයට පත් කරන්නේ නැහැ. ඇත්තටම අපි විශාල විදේශ මේ අර්බුදයකට මුදල් අර්බුදයකට පත් වෙලා තියෙනවා. ඒ වගේම විදේශ සංචිත පිළිබඳවත් මම පිළිගන්නවා අපි බැරෑරුම් තත්ත්වයක ඉන්න බව. ඒ වගේම මම මේ උත්තරීතර සභාවේදී මුදල් ඇමතිවරයා හැටියට ජනාධිපතිතුමාගේත් අගමැතිතුමාගේත් අවසරය පරිදි මම පැහැදිලිව කියනවා අනිවාර්යයෙන්ම අපිට ගෙවන්න තියෙන සෑම ඩොලර් එකක්ම ලබන අවුරුද්දේ අනිවාර්යයෙන්ම අපි ගෙවන බව සාතික කරනවා. ඒ සාතිකය දෙන්නේ වගකීමකින්. අපි පළවෙනි ජනවාරි මාසයේ මිලියන 500ක් ගෙවන්න තියෙනවා. ඊළඟට ජූලි මාසයේ මිලියන ඩොලර් 1000ක් ගෙවන්න තියෙනවා. ඒ අතර මැද තව අපිට ගෙවන්න තියෙනවා අපි ගත්ත ණය සේවා ගෙවීම් ප්‍රාග්ධන ගෙවීම් ප්‍රමාණයකුත් ඒ වගේම ණය සේවාකරණයට පොලි ප්‍රමාණයකුත් අපිට ගෙවන්න තියෙනවා. ඒ සියල්ලක්ම ගෙවන බව මේ උත්තරී සභාවේදී අපිට ඒ පිළිබඳව තියෙන සලස්ම අපි පැහැදිලිව දැනගෙන තියෙනවා ඒක කරනවා. ඒ වගේම ඒක හුඟක් අය කියනවා මේ කොවිඩ් අන්ද මුකුත් උනේ නැහැ කියලා. 2019 දී ඇමරිකන් ඩොලර් මිලියන 3607ක් ලැබුණා. නමුත් මේ අවුරුද්දේ විදේශ සංචාරකයින්ගෙන් ලැබුණේ මිලියන ඩොලර් මිලියන 100යි. ඔබතුමාලා කල්පනා කරන්න මොනතරම් අර්බුදයකට අපේ රට මේ කොවිඩ් නිසා පත් වුණාද කියලා. 2020 දී අපි ඇත්තටම 20 දී ආරක්ෂා වුණේ ඒක විදේශ ප්‍රේෂණ වලින්. හැබැයි ඒකත් මේ අවුරුද්ද වෙනකොට 6103කින් අඩු වුණා. ඉතින් මේක තමයි යථාර්ථය. ඔව් කොවිඩ් හන්දම නෙවෙයි අපි මේ උනේ. තව එක කාරණයක් තියෙනවා. අනික් කාරණය තමයි ඔබතුමාලා ගිය අවුරුදු 5 කරපු දේවල් නිසා තමයි මේක කොවිඩ් වලට අමතරව වැටුනේ. ඒකත් පිළිගන්න. ඔව් කොවිඩ් හන්දත් වැටුණා. ඔබතුමාලම කියන හන්ද අනිත් ඒවාත් වැටුණා. ඒකේ ප්‍රධාන වග උත්තරකරු ඔබතුමාලා. ඒක හන්ද තමයි ඔබතුමාලා හිටපු පක්ෂෙන් වක්කත් අරන් කරන්නවක්කත් ආත්ම ශක්තියක් නැතුව වෙන නමක් ගහගෙන තරන් කරේ. ඒක හන්දවයි එකට බැස්සේ. අඩු ගානේ එක්සත් ජාතික පක්ෂයෙන් ඉල්ලන්න බැරි වුණා.
After months of speculation with regards to the contents of the controversial sale of the Yugadanu power plant to US company New Fortress Energy, JVP leader Anurakumara Dissanayaka tabled a copy in Parliament today. The JVP leader highlighted several clauses in the agreement, including a 2-year ban non-disclosure clause and preferential treatment for the US company in future energy agreements.
Sri Lanka Rajesa New Fortress Energy සමාගම අතර අත්සන් කරන ලැබූ ගිවිසුම මේ පාර්ලිමේන්තුවට ඉදිරිපත් කරන්න කියලා අවස්ථා ගණනාවකට කිව්වා. ඒ වෙලාවේ විදුලි බල භාර අමාත්‍ය ගාමිණී ලොකුගේ මැතිතුමා එළබෙන සතියේ පාර්ලිමේන්තුවට ඉදිරිපත් කරන බව කිව්වා. නමුත් එතෙන් සිට ඔහු පාර්ලිමේන්තුවේ ඉන්න බවත් මා දැක්කේ නැහැ. හැබැයි මා දන්නා පරිදි ගිවිසුම කැබිනට් මණ්ඩලයට ඉදිරිපත් වෙලත් නැහැ. පාර්ලිමේන්තුවට ඉදිරිපත් වෙලත් නැහැ. නමුත් මා සතු ඒ ගිවිසුම තිබෙනවා. විශේෂයෙන්ම ඒකේ සේල හැටියට ශ්‍රී ලංකා ආණ්ඩුවත් බය හැටියට NFE ශ්‍රී ලංකා පවර් හෝල්ඩින් සමාගමත් අත්සන් කරපු ගිවිසුම. ශ්‍රී ලංකා රජය වෙනුවෙන් අත්සන් කරලා තිබෙන්නේ මිස්ටර් සජිත් රුචිකා ආටිගල. ඒතර මේ ගිවිසුම තමයි මේ පාර්ලිමේන්තුවට ඉදිරිපත් කරන්න කියලා අපි අවධාරණය කරේ. ඒ මොකද මේක පෞද්ගලික දේපල පවරාදීම් පිළිබඳ ගිවිසුමක් නෙවෙයි. මේ වෙනුවට රජයේ ආයතන ගණනාවකට හිමිව තිබෙන කෙරවලපිටිය බලාගාරයත් ඇමරිකානු සමාගමක් වෙත පවරාදීම සඳහා අත්සන් කරලද ගිවිසුමක්. හැබැයි තමුන්නාන්සලා දිගින් දිගටම මාස එකහමාරකට වඩා වැඩි කාලයක් මේ ගිවිසුම පාර්ලිමේන්තුවට ඉදිරිපත් කරන්න කියලා කිව්වත් මේ ගිවිසුම පාර්ලිමේන්තුවට ඉදිරිපත් කරේ නෑ. ඒ නිසා ගරු කතානායකතුමනි මම ඒ ගිවිසුම සභාගත කරනවා. මේ ගිවිසුමේදී වැදගත් දේ තමයි මේ කැබිනට් පත්‍රිකාවෙන් අවසර දෙන්නේ කාටද? මේ කැබිනට් පත්‍රිකාවෙන් අවසර දෙන්නේ නිව් ෆෝර්ට්‍රස් එනර්ජි සමාගම සමග ගිවිසුමකට එළඹෙන්නේ. හැබැයි මේ ගිවිසුම අත්සන් කර තිබෙන්නේ කා සමගද? NFE ඒක නිව් ෆෝර්ට්‍රස් එනර්ජි. ශ්‍රී ලංකා පවර් හෝල්ඩින් LLC කියන සමාගම සමග. ඒතර කැබිනට් මණ්ඩලයෙන් අවසර දෙනවා නිව් ෆෝර්ට්‍රස් එනර්ජි කියන සමාගම සමග ගිවිසුම අත්සන් කරන්න. කැබිනට් මණ්ඩලයෙන් බලය දෙන ලද සමාගම සමග නෙවෙයි මේ ගිවිසුම අත්සන් කරලා තිබෙන්නේ. ඒ නිසා මේ මුළුමනින්ම කැබිනට් මණ්ඩලයත් නොමග යැවීමක් හැටියට මේක සඳහන් කරන්න පුළුවන්. ඒ වගේම මේ 13 එක වගන්තිය පැහැදිලිව සඳහන් කොට තිබෙනවා අවුරුදු 2ක් යනතෙක් මේ ගිවිසුම ඒ කියන්නේ මේකේ රහස්‍යගත හා මේ ගිවිසුම අවුරුදු 2ක් යනකම් දෙපාර්ශ්ව අතර එකඟතාවකින් තොරව රටට හෝ ජනතාවට ප්‍රකාශනපත් නොකර සිටින්නේ. කතානායකතුමනි එහෙම කරන්න පුළුවන්ද මේ රටේ දේපල පිළිබඳව? මේ රටේ දේපල අයිතිව තිබෙන්නේ මේ රටේ මහජනයාට. මුදල් අමාත්‍යාංශ අමාත්‍යවරයාට හෝ එහි ලේකම්වරයා ආටිකලට පවරලා නැහැ. ඒ නිසා මේ රටේ දේපල පිළිබඳ අත්සන් කරලා ලබන ඕනෑම ගිවිසුම මේ රටේ ජනතාවට දැන ගැනීම සඳහා පරම අයිතියක් තිබෙනවා. හැබැයි තමුන්නාන්සේලා 13 එක වගන්තිය දානවා මේ ගිවිසුම සභාගත කර හැකි වන්නේ ඉලිදරව් කළ හැකි වන්නේ දෙපාර්ශ්වයේ ඇමරිකාවේ සමාගම එකඟ වන්නේ නම් පමණයි. මම අහන්නේ ඇයි එහෙම වගන්තියක් දාන්නේ? ඒ විතරක් නෙවෙයි. මේකේ 3-2 වගන්තිය කියන ඉදිරි ගිවිසුම් අත්සන් කරනකොට. ඉදිරි ගිවිසුම් අත්සන් කරනකොට මේක NFE ශ්‍රී ලංකා පවර් හෝල්ඩින් සමාගමට ලැබියාවක් සහිතව. එහෙට අනුග්‍රහය දක්වන ලෙස ඉදිරි ගිවිසුම් අත්සන් කළ යුතුයි කියලා. ඒ නිසා මේ ගිවිසුම සංගවාගෙන හිටපු කරුණු ඉතා පැහැදිලිද?
Moving on with other stories, President Gotabaya Rajapaksa argues the case to have more private sector universities in the country and called any opposition to the idea nonsensical. In doing so, the head of state highlighted examples from across the world and said that those universities are independent and self-governing.
The General Convocation 2021 of the General Sir John Kothalavala Defence University was conducted at the BMICH yesterday. It was worked off under the patronage of President Gotabaya Rajapaksa. Speaking at the event, the head of state said that Sri Lanka's education system is outdated and unable to cater to the job requirements of the 21st century, and also touched on the age-old issue of state universities in the island lacking capacity.
An even larger problem concerning Sri Lanka's education system, however, is its extreme capacity constraints. It has led to a constant narrowing of opportunities throughout the entire education system. It has almost resulted in the system being designed with more intent to fail students than to help them succeed. We see this in the large numbers who sit for their level examinations but do not qualify to study at the advanced level. We see this in the large numbers who travel abroad to obtain their university education in other countries. Not only do the parents of these students incur high costs, but the country loses valuable foreign exchange. And most worryingly, it is deprived of many outstanding young people who will most likely continue to live abroad instead of returning to Sri Lanka after graduation. Students who have less affluent parents end up following various other courses, but nevertheless do not provide the holistic education that universities do. The majority simply drop out of further education altogether, end up taking whatever low-paying jobs. Worst of all, because of the high esteem in which university education held in our country, these students may feel like failures for years to come, if not for the rest of their lives.
Further, President Gotabaya Rajapaksa also argued the case for increasing private sector universities in the country.
Almost all the best universities in the world are not state universities. Most are structured as independent, self-governing entities focused on education. There is no reason why such institutions cannot be established in Sri Lanka. If the legal framework needs to be changed to make this possible, that can be done. The old objections about higher education institutions outside the state universities being education shops that sell degrees is nonsensical. Objecting to the establishment of universities outside the public sector on such flimsy grounds is not just tragic, it is a crime. It should be the role of the University Grant Commission to regulate and maintain the standard of all universities, irrespective of whether they are state-funded or self-funded. If anything, allowing the establishment of more universities in Sri Lanka will create more competition among such institutions for students at all levels, as well as for lecturers and professors. Those who object vehemently to the establishment of more universities in Sri Lanka lack confidence in their ability to succeed such a competitive environment. If we have a diverse and competitive tertiary education system that goes beyond what is currently provided by state universities, it might even encourage students who can afford to study abroad or those who win scholarships to universities in other countries to remain here. Establishing a freer environment for tertiary education in the country could also attract world-class regional higher educational institutions into Sri Lanka. This will also help Sri Lanka attract students from regional countries including India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and even from countries further away. In time, this will transform higher education in Sri Lanka into viable foreign exchange revenue generator for the economy. We must create new opportunities for our best and brightest without limiting ourselves to the status quo because of past practices, traditions, or outdated laws and regulations.
Now, shifting our attention towards the pandemic situation, the Special Committee on COVID-19 Control has decided to make carrying of vaccine cards mandatory at public places, which means that unvaccinated people are prohibited from frequenting those spaces. Permission, meanwhile, has also been granted for the teens between the ages of 12 and 15 to be vaccinated as well. What's more, booster doses will be rolled out island-wide starting tomorrow for all those above the age of 20.
In the face of waning immunity following the full 2-dose vaccine regime, the need for a booster dose arose. With that, many countries rolled out booster shots targeting the elderly and the immunocompromised. However, intensifying worries about the new, more transmissible Omicron variant have prompted some nations to expand their booster rollout to larger portions of their populations. In such a backdrop, the World Health Organization has made a recommendation as to who will require a booster. It says that people who are immunocompromised and those who received an inactivated COVID-19 vaccine should receive a booster dose to protect themselves against waning immunity. Chinese vaccines Sinovac and Sinopharm, as well as India's Covaxin, fall under the inactivated vaccines category, which contains the dead virus. Sri Lanka too began its booster dose rollout with the frontline workers and gradually expanding it to those with comorbidities and the elderly. Members of the public who have completed 3 months after receiving the second jab are eligible to receive the booster. Having received the nod by the National Advisory Committee on Communicable Diseases to start the process on the 8th, the campaign will start island-wide tomorrow for all those who are above the age of 20.
This third dose is given in all parts of the country through the relevant medical officers of health. In view of the probable close interactions that people might encounter during the festive season and end of the year, it is very important to get your booster dose of the vaccination as early as possible.
However, the Colombo municipality have already begun the process, with the booster doses being rolled out today.
අද දිනේ සිට මේ මාස අවසන් දිනය වනතුරු නොකඩවා උදේ 9 සිට සවස 4 දක්වා මධ්‍යස්ථාන 6ක එන්නත්කරණය සිදු කරනු ලබනවා.
Meanwhile, Deputy Director General of Education and Research at the Ministry of Health, Dr. Hemant Herath, stressed that having the booster does not mean people should let their guard down.
We need to emphasize the fact that even you get the third dose of vaccine, you are not 100% protected from getting infected. So therefore, you are supposed to adhere to the health guidelines to the letter to get yourself protected from infection. However, once everyone get vaccinated, their immunity is high and therefore the load of virus that is produced within the body and released to the environment will be low. So therefore, it will help indirectly to reduce the spread of the disease.
In the meantime, meeting this morning, the Special Committee on COVID-19 Control too made some decisions about the booster dose campaign. During the meeting, President Gotabaya Rajapaksa had instructed to do all that's necessary to complete the administration of booster doses within the next 2 weeks. The experts observed that the vast majority of infections reported in recent days are from among the unvaccinated category, and the bulk of them are youths. Meanwhile, in a ramp-up measure to prevent the virus spreading, the committee has also decided to make the vaccine card mandatory in the near future at public places. It means unvaccinated people are prevented from entering public places, and if they do, they will be taken to book. In the meantime, it was also revealed that permission has been granted to administer a second dose of the Pfizer vaccine to the 16 to 19 age category, as well as a first dose to the children of 12 to 15 age category. With that, the President had advised the committee to plan the vaccine rollout along with the Education Ministry and implement it as soon as possible.
Meanwhile, President Gotabaya Rajapaksa has given instructions to further relax the restrictions imposed on tourism while taking into account the gradual increase in tourism-related activities in the island. Upon those instructions, the Health Ministry has issued directives to the Civil Aviation Authority of Sri Lanka to lift the ban imposed on several South African nations. Accordingly, the travel ban imposed on passengers with a transit or 14-day travel history to South Africa, Namibia, Zimbabwe, Botswana, Lesotho and Swaziland was lifted. The detection of Omicron sparked fresh restrictions globally, including travel bans. According to the World Health Organization, the variant is detected in more than 40 countries so far, despite most of these countries having imposed restrictions on travel from South Africa. We will see you shortly on the other side of this break. Stay with us.
Big 3.
Welcome back. You're watching First at 9. Now, climate change undermines the stability of states and even leads to loss of statehood because of territory disappearance. This is the view put forth by Sri Lanka's permanent representative to the United Nations, Mohan Peiris, as he spoke at a high-level open debate during the Security Council meeting yesterday. The envoy also called for a global response to tackle the interplays between climate change and terrorism.
Sri Lanka's permanent representative to the United Nations, Mohan Peiris, yesterday addressed the high-level open debate on the theme Maintenance of International Peace and Security, security in the context of terrorism and climate change during the Security Council meeting. During his address, Peiris impressed upon the Council that terrorism and climate change are not isolated matters, but are linked with grave effects.
We must note that the face of terrorism has become extremely complex. Its roots have gone beyond spreading religious or political ideology, and terrorism has become a governance mechanism and a lucrative economic activity to some. It is this phenomenon and the new modus operandi that we must take cognizance of and take more proactive stance in curbing. The scourge of terrorism will be a persistent threat to global peace and security unless its feeders and threat multipliers are not addressed, and climate change has established itself as one of the greatest threat multipliers. The interplay between climate change and terrorism is a critical dimension of the climate security nexus and needs to be evaluated, discussed, and met with a unified global response. Let me say a quick word regarding security and climate change. A central question is whether climate change is a security issue. In the late 80s, climate change was seen as second only to global nuclear war. In 2009, the UN adopted a resolution on climate change and its possible security implications in Resolution 63-281 of 2009. This resolution resulted in a report prepared by the UNSG, which identified 5 aspects that was considered as having an impact on security. Firstly, vulnerability. It said that climate change threatened food, security, human health, and exposed humans to extreme events. Secondly, development. It said that climate change results in reversing the development process and it exacerbates the vulnerability and undermines the stability of states. Thirdly, coping and security. It said that migration over natural resources and other coping resources increased domestic issues. Fourthly, it dealt with statelessness, where there are implications for rights, security, and sovereignty of loss of statehood because of the disappearance of territory. And finally, it dealt with international conflict in the context that there may be possibility that international cooperation from the impact of climate change on undemarcated international resources. So climate change has brought the world to face unprecedented problems. It has the potential to affect the lives of individuals who live in coastal regions or a farmer who is dependent on rain. It can affect national security by disrupting the livelihoods, displacement and migration, and increase conflict over limited resources and property of people and economy and safety of nations. In certain regions of the world, we have seen where the loss of traditional livelihoods have increased the opportunity cost of exploring membership in armed groups, as we have seen the increase of youth viewing the potentials of terrorist groups and rebel groups as an alternative source of income. Increased insurgent activity feeds environmental collapse, agriculture and infrastructural loss, degradation of natural resources, and desertification, creating an environment of internal unrest, of migration, statelessness, and ending in conflict over scarce resources. Understanding the root causes and ensuring that we do not underestimate the impact of climate change is imperative to ensure a long-standing global peace. Terrorism and climate change are not siloed threats to humanity, but rather different manifestations of the same threat, one that builds upon human fear and insecurity.
Now then, circling back to the whole pandemic situation, medical experts are of the view that school closures are not the answer in the face of a threat of infection faced by school children. During a media briefing today, the Health Ministry said that living with the virus is challenging, but it is a challenge that has to be overcome somehow. Meanwhile, there were also revelations during the media briefing of instances where doctors have prescribed unnecessary medication for COVID-19 patients.
Following the reopening of schools, questions continue to be raised on the safety of unvaccinated children in school environments and whether the harm from school closures is greater than the risk of the virus. If the virus spreads among the children, the biggest risk of it all is that children infected with COVID-19 may be asymptomatic. These questions were put to Health Ministry officials during a media briefing today. However, according to experts, the answer lies not in closures.
Anyway, the school children are not the vaccinated group, no, majority. Anyway, we know worldwide, small children, they don't show very severe symptoms. They have a mild disease. That was one of the reasons, and also because the schools were closed for such a long time, we had to get the schools open. But we are offering the vaccine to children can be given the vaccine. That is the older children. So anyway, when you have a non-vaccinated group, you should expect that the disease will be occurring in those groups. And we are seeing an increase of symptoms being reported from children. But we are not saying that that is an indication to close the schools and take drastic decisions. Our challenge and our way forward should be to go ahead and live with this and ensure that the schools can function.
Meanwhile, issuing a statement today, the Minister of Health said that the upcoming festive season is not a reason to close down the country, adding that getting the booster shot soon will give people the immunity required to fight the virus.
ඉදිරියේදී පැවතෙන්නේ උත්සව සමයක්. මේ සියල්ල වහන්න බෑ තව දුරටත්. අපි මේ නිදහස් කිරීම ක්‍රමානුකූලව කරන අතරතුර විශේෂිත අපි එන්නත ලැබලා දෙනවා. ඒ නිසා තමන්ගේ උත්සව වලට යනකොට සති දෙකක් යනවා ඒක ඇඟට උරා ගන්නට. මේ සතිය ලබා ගත්තොත් මම හිතනවා උත්සව සමය වෙනකොට අපි මේ සති දෙක ගිහිල්ලා අපි සූදානම් වෙනවා. අපේ බූස්ටර් එකත් අපි අරගෙන ප්‍රොවිඩ් ප්‍රොටෝකෝල් අමතක නොකර ඒකටත් එක්ක ගස් වෙලා කරන්න.
Meanwhile, there were also revelations during the Health Promotion Bureau media briefing of instances where doctors have prescribed unnecessary medication for COVID-19 patients.
In 247, right at the beginning, we said we are not going to write any prescriptions. Maybe very simple drugs like paracetamol, chlorpheniramine, very simple things. So ivermectin has been sort of discussed in our forums. There may be people who are giving some doctors lat anavashya antibiotics. මුල දවසේම මේ මුල දවසේ උණ කියලා කැස්සකුත් නැතුව හිම්රිසාවකුත් නැතුව යන රෝගීන්ට දීලා තියෙනවා prednisolone, dexamethasone. ඒ group එකේ එක එක නම් වලින් එන බෙහෙත් ලියනවා. මේක මුලදී දෙන එක රෝගියාට අනතුරක් වෙන්න පුළුවන්. ඒවා එන්න ඕනේ රෝගියාගේ ප්‍රශ්න වැඩි වුණ අවස්ථාවේ ඔක්සිජන් ප්‍රතිශතය අඩු වෙන වෙලාවට ඒ වෙලාවටයි දෙන්න ඕනේ බෙහෙත් මුලදී ලියවෙනවා. ලෙඩා දන්නෙත් නැහැ ලෙඩක් ගන්නවා. ලෙඩත් අනිත් එක සමහරට අපේ ක්‍රමයක් තියෙනවනේ අපිට දන්න නර්ස් කෙනෙකුට කියලා බෙහෙත් ගෙන්න ගන්න පුළුවන්. අනිත් ලෙඩාට දුන්න බෙහෙත් අපිත් ගෙන්න ගන්නවා. ඒ වගේ නොයෙකුත් වැරදි ක්‍රම කීපයක්ම තියෙනවා. අනිත් එක ඇන්ටිබයොටික්ස් මේ ඇමොක්සිසිලින් කියන බෙහෙත හෝ ඇසිත්‍රොමයිසින් කියන බෙහෙත කිසි දෙයක අවශ්‍යතාවයක් නැහැ. මේක වෛරස් එකක්. වෛරස් එකට විරුද්ධව අපි තාම බෙහෙතක් හොයාගෙන නැහැනේ හරියට. ඇන්ටිබයොටික්ස් දීමෙන් වෙන්නේ අපිට ඇන්ටිබයොටික් එක අවශ්‍ය වෙන වෙලාවට දෙන්න දෙයක් නැති වෙන එක.
Meanwhile, a fundamental rights petition has been filed before the Supreme Court by the Samagi Janabalawega seeking a ruling on the violation of fundamental human rights through regulations issued by the health authorities under the Quarantine Act to prevent party political activists from gathering. The petition filed by SJB General Secretary Ranjit Madhu Bandara demands 10 million rupees in compensation from the respondents. The petition alleges that the Minister of Health had issued a Gazette notification under the Quarantine Act on the 9th of November restricting public meetings, which he claims was brought in specifically to prevent a planned protest by the Samagi Janabalawega. The petition alleges that the orders issued by the Minister of Health were politically motivated with malicious intent and were issued to prevent opposition activists from gathering. The petitioner says that on this basis, the orders issued by the Director General of Health Services and the Inspector General of Police were against the law. The Ministry of Power says that there won't be any further disruptions to the electricity supply in the island from today. Several areas experienced power disruptions over the past few days between 6 p.m. and 9:30 p.m. as the operations of the Norachole power plant were not up to 100% capacity following the major power outage of last Friday. The Ministry of Power noted that the second and third power stations at the Norachole power plant are now fully operational. Welcome back. You're watching First at 9. Now then, despite concerns of a possible new wave of COVID, Sri Lankan exporters are poised with an optimistic outlook for export growth for the next 6 months. A report compiled by the US Agency for International Development and the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce showed that 48% of firms expect to have high or moderate export growth in the next 6 months.
Despite the disruptions brought on by the pandemic, Sri Lanka's export sector has been able to weather the storm rather successfully. This year, in particular, Sri Lanka's exports in the month of October rose to a historic high of $1.16 billion, a 35% hike compared to the year 2020. The Export Development Board said that this was the highest ever merchandise export figure in any October in the country's history. In addition, a report compiled by the US Agency for International Development and the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce paint a rather positive image for the export's future for the next 6 months. According to the report, exporters had expressed confidence about their export growth in the next 6 months compared to the outlook on the economy. The report stated that 54% of firms expect a moderate to severe contraction of the economy compared to the last 6 months. But 48% of exporting firms expect moderate or high growth in the next 6 months. 54% of firms had stated that they are eyeing at least 1 or 2 new markets, apart from the traditional markets they are already in. 22% of firms are looking at expanding to 3 to 5 new markets, while 10% are looking to enter 5 new markets. It is, however, notable that export companies expect to enter markets such as Australia, China and Canada, 3 countries which are not among the top 5 traditional export markets of the island. However, to drive the export growth in the next 6 months, firms are looking at measures to improve their market presence online, focus on developing customized products, improve pricing and service, while also improving supply chain capabilities. Chairman of the Export Development Board, Suresh Dimel, had these thoughts on the exporters' ambitious plans.
We need to understand that we cannot sell everything to everybody. We should focus on the high-value markets. Sri Lanka is a high-value producer of agricultural products. We are one of the highest value producers of high-value garments. Therefore, there is no reason why we cannot reach the Lamborghinis and the Mercedes markets in the world. Therefore, I am very optimistic about the next few months, and I feel quite confident that we will exceed our expectations in the future if we think positive and we look at diversity and we make sure that we add value and have a entrepreneurial or industrial mentality as opposed to a trader mentality, because we have products that are so much better than any place else in the world, especially our agricultural products. If we target the high value markets and produce a high quality product, I am very confident that we can grow our exports in the next few months.
Now taking a look at the Colombo Bourse, shares ended nearly 2% higher today, extending gains from the previous session and boosted by rising industrial and financial stocks. The CSE All Share Price Index rose at 1.92% to close at 11,393.48, ending higher in 4 of the 5 previous sessions, gaining 3.7% for the week and remaining near record levels. The S&P SL 20 meanwhile rose 88.74 points to close at 4,074.63. Now here's Dimantha Matthew with a brief report on today's market performance.
Today we saw a major surge in the market with the index rushing up by 215 points as the index surged to 11,393 level. So Overall, what we saw during intraday is that initially there was a spike in the market, but then afterwards there was a continuous upward trend up to the last hour and a half of trading, and from there on we saw that some sort of consolidation in the index at that higher level. So a very strong uptrend, a strong buying interest emerged in the market today, led by the transportation sector counter, where we saw a significant amount of buying interest at the start of the day itself. So the global freight prices are positively affecting the transportation segment.
In the currency market, the rupee once again ended at 202.99 against the US dollar. Now let's take a look at how the Sri Lankan rupee fared against other major currencies during the day. And that's it from all of us here at First at 9. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.